things, not just submit things that may or may not be accepted.
But I hate to keep harping this, but do you have any experience of building the non-coding part of a?
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
let me talk about Battle for Westmount. It's a really good example. I mentioned this before. This is an open source game. It's a turn-based strategy fantasy game. It consistently shows up as, like, when people make top 10 lists of best open source games, it consistently shows up number 1 or number 2. This is despite the fact of having this leadership vacuum at the top that I've been describing. Basically, the committee has mostly been doing a pretty good job, and it only becomes difficult and stressful when the project is facing a challenge about what direction it has to go in. But okay, I'm not going to talk about that right now. The point is how we manage artists and musicians. One of the things that makes Battle for Westmount attractive is we have full orchestral background music in a neoclassical, romantic sort of style. And it's amazing. I don't know how Dave managed to recruit the original musicians to do this, but that's actually what attracted me to the project originally, was the soundtrack. Oh my God! It's like a movie with good production value.
I've never played Westmount with the sound on. I usually have the sound off because if I play a game, it's because I'm not feeling
Sound is fantastic.
Oh, you are so missing out on
I've
a
never
major
played with the
element.
sound turned on.
So you're missing out on a major element of it.
The music's great, the sound effects are cheesy and hilarious.
The music's great, and I have to tell you that one of the things I have done as one of the mainline campaign maintainers is I've spent a lot of time matching up the tracks for mood and emotional content to the different battle scenes. And that was an important part of the composition. That was not a trivial thing to do. Anyway, so we have a large group of musicians who compose tracks for us, and we have artists who do animations and story art for the various campaigns. And the way we handle that is we have an art content manager and a music content manager. Those guys are part of the core group and and have commit rights. The artists and musicians in general don't. They go through the content managers. So they're sort of a lobe off the side of the coding community, and we find that works pretty well in general. Is that a responsive answer to your question?
I think so. I would actually like to see how. Do you have? I don't know the community for Battle for Westmount, but is there an active bug reporting community?
There is.
Okay. And then how do you manage and how do you cultivate that? Because there's a project that
we have lots of users, okay, and the users tend to be. There's a substantial cohort of the users who are geeky and technical, and if they spot a bug, they will go to the bug tracker and report it, and then we follow up with them by email when we need to.
He kind of has the easy job there because with Battle for Westmount, the type of people who write good bug reports and the type of people who use the software have a lot of overlap in the Venn diagram. A better example for a harder case is a project that I lead called Frog and Owl, which is, we call it the Educational Technology Meta Project. Basically what we do is we go around recruiting educators to help create free educational content and providing resources to other open source software projects that actually build software. Because something that we were finding is most educational software projects are attached to bigger, more general projects with their own politics that then eat the goals of the educational project. And we were tired of seeing that happen. So by having another base that can help with training and server resources and whatnot for educational projects, we're seeing more of the small projects become independent and have more freedom to do what they do best. So in running this project, I'd say about a third of the people on the project are highly technical. They're coders, system administrators, things like that. The other 2/3 are elementary school teachers and high school teachers and people who make graphics for the teachers for their training materials and people who are translators to get the content into other languages and things like that who are not highly technical. And we spend a lot of time working with them and helping them contribute. We have a very similar structure. But instead of just having, say, a content lead, we have one teacher who's an elementary school teacher who takes the lead for elementary school content. Just because we find that elementary school and secondary school tend to be culturally different, and the teachers get along better if we do this. We have another educator who's a veteran high school educator who takes care of high school content. And they do a lot of the interaction with the tech team. And then we have a couple of technical members who spend a lot of time just doing training for our non-technical people, not just to make them feel included, but we do take the time to acculturate them despite the fact that they're not hackers, because they are hackers, they're just content hackers. And that helps a lot because teachers versus techies, a lot of the problem in edutech is caused by these two groups not coming together. And we already have techies who love knowledge and are curious, so acculturating the teachers a little bit, we can meet in the middle. And making a lot of training available to the teachers helps because they're trying to learn to use things like Git and that. And if we don't make formal training available to them, they tend to be less comfortable trying to use things like a bug
Right.
tracker and things like that. And being educators themselves, they value people who take the time to educate.
Right.
Can we sneak a couple more questions in, and then I do want to hit growing pains. Anybody else before we move on to growing pains? Okay.
I want to give other people a chance to ask questions. One, sort of shifting tracks a little bit, when you talk about a shared culture, I usually, so when people say that, I see that on the spectrum from incredibly culty and intolerant of dissent to just making sure that we don't have people, we make sure that we're not putting hardcore atheists and hardcore fundamentalist Christians in the same room where they have any temptation to talk about religion. And
Okay.
I'm saying
You're
like
talking
we're,
about, okay, you're talking about a different
That's a
angle
false
on culture.
dichotomy.
Yeah, it's a false dichotomy.
We have, like I said, I've worked with the hardcore Christian fundamentalists and I'm the pagan, and it's not been a problem because when we talk about shared culture, we're talking about identity. And if everyone on the project identifies as something, as an educator, as a hacker, as something, they have a shared identity, that gives you a basis for communication and a basis for working together. For example, I have, a few years ago, someone put up a slide about their mother being better able to understand Drupal, and the Drupal community blew up, and you have the feminists and the people who think that the feminists are oversensitive, and the people who think the feminists shouldn't call themselves feminists, and everybody explodes. This is because Drupal lacks a shared culture. I can get up and start making Firefly jokes, or how to shoot yourself in the foot jokes, or jokes about weird compiler messages, and everyone here is going to laugh, even the people who aren't sure they get it, but they're watching the other people. Because if you're here, you probably identify as a hacker or a programmer already. And we have a shared culture. As Eric said, the best litmus test for if you have good, strong shared culture is that everyone laughs at the same jokes. Shared culture lets us work together.
And note that that's not a criterion about who you exclude. It's a criterion about who includes themselves.
Exactly. Because there are jokes that I will not make in the middle of my open source community meeting. Not just because I'm afraid of offending people, but because this isn't that venue. And as long as you maintain that shared culture, as an example, there was one project I was in where someone got horribly offended and decided I was a homophobe because I didn't remember that they were gay. I code with them and I outright looked at them and I said, I fail to see how that matters unless I want to sleep with you or know you well enough to give you relationship advice. Because it's not.
Not only is that true, that is the kind of thing a hacker would say.
Yes, exactly.
So that was a valuable communication on two levels. It conveyed truth to the person, and it also conveyed an important cultural basic about how hackers behave and how you are expected to behave as a hacker.
Absolutely.
What matters is the code. Show us the code. The rest don't mean shit.
Exactly. And that's how we avoid things like PyCon blowups and insensitivity garbage. So
Let out, fork the code, and get fired. That's typical.
on to growing pains because we only have 15 minutes left. One of the biggest things I see is not small projects with problems, because a small project you get a small group of people who have the same level of competency, the same goals, the same culture, and already probably knew each other for a while before they got together. Now, when your project grows, that's when we start to see problems happening because a lot of people don't plan for scale. And when you scale the complexity of your project, you have technical issues you need to deal with. When you scale the number of people working on your project and the diversity of that group, you have social logistics you need to handle.
Yeah.
Let's see, do you want to start this one off, or shall I?
Well, the first thing to understand is that if your number of people on your project is n, the management overhead and potential friction goes up as n squared. Well, actually, because that's proportional to the number of communications paths between the people.
Absolutely. And so centralized communication is key. That's the easy one. Most people know how to set up a mailing list or an
Right.
IRC channel or whatnot.
One subtle effect of that, by the way, the centralized communication channel, is that it actually means you don't have to pay for all the arcs in the graph. It makes your communication graph star-shaped
Yes,
because it's all going through a hub, and that avoids a lot of friction.
it does. The next thing is, hopefully when your project is small, you started acculturating the new people as they came in, so you already have a shared culture. If you didn't, this is the time to establish one. I really hope you did when the project was small. It's like 100,000 times easier. But when your project starts to see growing pains and you see people not getting along, a lot of times these are cultural problems. And I'm not just talking about religion and sexual habits and who's a hick and who's a city boy and so on and so forth. I'm also talking about things like the people who want to make the giant monolith versus the people who are very art of Unix programming and want the small, simple tools that speak to one another well. And oh my god, the number of small core arguments I had with Drupal people. Things like that. Technical culture is important too. The people who are married to one programming language and absolutely in love with it, and the people who say, well, you know, if we did this and this, we might want to use this tool instead just because it's the right tool for the job. We realize we don't use it for many other things. And technical disagreements happen, but if you have a core that, one, values curiosity, two, socially disincentivizes insisting expertise where no expertise exists. A good open source project rewards curiosity like crazy, rewards the person who's willing to jump in and try when they don't really know what's going on, but will strongly disincentivize the person who says, I know this works exactly this way because I tested it and it didn't. Because a lot of open source works based on trust.
Yeah.
And that trust comes with either knowing what you're talking about or admitting that you don't. And it's okay to not know what you're talking about if you're admitting it.
Right. And this is why, personally, one of the things I look for opportunities to say is, I don't know. Because if you hear me say, I don't know, and you have a brain in your head, the next time I claim that I do know, I have more credibility.
Absolutely.
And you know what the best part of that is, so if you're ever around him on IRC or in the hacker community, is when he claims, I don't know, the deafening silence. Astounding. If he doesn't know, we're all screwed.
Oh, there's all kinds of amusing stuff that happens when I show up on IRC.
So anyway, as your group grows, that centralized communication helps a lot, that shared culture helps a lot. Another thing that you need to start putting in place is process. And a lot of hackers have this like kind of twitchy thing that starts happening when you talk about process, because they're picturing pointy-haired bosses with thick glasses trying to cram them in a cubicle and shout at them. We don't like that kind of
That
process.
group would include me, by the way.
Yes, I realize. See, I've avoided that situation in my work life, so I'm slightly less twitchy, but only slightly. I can keep the twitching down if I'm careful. But process is good. In the email I wrote to the project lead before I stepped off the project that inspired this, I finally told him, I said, look, I don't blame the junior coder who took the site down in the database, because he's a junior coder. The kid just had his 19th birthday, he's in college, and this is the first time he's ever written a line of code for production. He should not have had the right to commit to something that's automatically propagated to a live site. I said every one of us at some point had some senior developer curmudgeon slap our hand when we tried to do something stupid and prevent us from breaking everything.
So let me talk about one of the most valuable social bulwarks you can have to prevent this kind of grief from screwing up your social structure. Really, really good test suites are your friend. Because when you have really, really good test suites and a version control system, you can afford to let the kids play and break things because you always know when it breaks and you can always revert to a good state. So for the health, for the social health of your project, build a goddamn regression test suite first.
I agree 100%.
I want a comment there from the inside of a commercial product that had this problem. We implemented features at Xenos just as quickly as we could because we want customers to pay for them. No thought was given to regression testing. No thought was given to, bug fixes or QA until we got a lot of our large customers together, and they spent 3 days taking the CEO's head off. This doesn't just apply to open source. Good software practices and good community management inside of a dev team in a commercial business works exactly the same way.
Okay, we just got the time is up sign, so anyone who wants to catch us after that's great. I'm gonna leave one more thought and then see if Eric has anything else to.
Okay.
How to get process without a pointy-haired boss. Step one is do as much of it on a technical level as possible. Have permissions that make sense. Have an excellent regression testing suite.
Yeah.
Have a bug tracker and use it so people can keep track of what's going on.
There's a rule, okay? The amount of social friction you will experience is inversely proportional to the amount of verification machinery you put in place.
Absolutely. The next thing is get rid of the fear response, because the whole problem I mentioned would have been averted if that newbie, when he saw that everything broke, was not too terrified to tell someone. So there should be seniors who make a point of being friendly and approachable, knowing the news, and knowing that there's no way that going and telling this person I broke everything is going to make my life worse.
Yeah.
Because that's how things get handled smoothly. And the final thing is simply to have a culture where saying I don't know is looked better upon than hiding and trying to deal with a problem and waiting for things to get worse. Where you reward people who are willing to say I don't know.
And one way you could do that if you were in a position of being a project lead or a lieutenant is in your public communications, have a sense of humor.
Yes!
It's the most effective way to be approachable. Make jokes. Make jokes about yourself, for Christ's sakes. I do that all the time.
Corporate lawyers hate that.
Not all.
We're not terribly fond of corporate lawyers.
My corporate lawyer is terrified of me.
Okay, we need to call it because people need this room, but thank you everyone.